Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viriyam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhetamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krita Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah. Most of the people are scared of the blackout. The before life it was a blackout, after death it is a blackout, in the deep sleep state it is a blackout. But here Shankaracharya is telling something very nice, very important. This is the most central to Vedanta. The blackout is not a believed blackout. It is a known blackout. It is an experienced blackout. It is not inferred. It is not remembered. It is known. It is a known blackout. When you wake up from the sushupti, you say, I didn't see anything. Even that you didn't see anything, you saw. There is never an absence of sight. There can be there can be freedom from the object of sense, but there is no freedom from the sight, because the blackout also is a known blackout. The sushupti is a blackout. Even before the birth, the blackout was known blackout. Even before the birth, one can understand he was there. He was there very much as consciousness, he was there. As the labels, he was not there. As the form, he was not there. As the thinker, he was not there. As the labels, social labels, he was not there. But as consciousness, he was there. Consciousness is what is called the sight. He was aware of the blackout. And therefore, even the darkness, when you say this is all dark, then in the darkness also there is knowledge. Even a blind man knows that his blindness falls within his knowledge. He knows he is blind. A deaf man knows he is deaf. In the same manner, the blackout also is known as a blackout. And therefore, the blackout has to be understood. It is not a blackout of things. It is a presence of oneself, free from everything. It is one's non-dual presence. That is why in your meditation also, when you withdraw a thought, when the thought is negated, it is your presence, freedom from thought. It is your freedom from thought. It is your presence, freedom from thought. But when with the freedom from thought, we call it as absence of thought. Absence of thought means absence of perception. And absence of perception looks like a blackout. That's why Bhagavan Krishna, at 6 o'clock itself, he closed his eyes. Now it is all dark. Now give me food. Yashoda said, it is only 6 o'clock. It is only 5 o'clock. How can you have food? Krishna said, he closed his eyes. He says, darkness is nothing but non-perception. And one thinks that it instead of a non-perception, he thinks it is another object. Darkness is not a part of creation, please. Darkness is a misconception. It is a non-perception. You perceive a thing and you don't perceive a thing. That non-perception of a thing looks like the darkness, another thing. It is not a material thing. It's not a black thing. It's not a material thing. It looks like a black thing. Looks like a material thing, but it is not material thing at all. Some people may believe it that it is material. Darkness is not material. Light is material. Light is a positive thing, whereas darkness is a misconception of non-perception. Non-perception itself, when you don't perceive anything, when you close your eyes, it looks dark. But the darkness, it is not a thing. It is a non-perception. Similarly, the blackout is another word for non-perception. And that non-perception means it is your presence free from everything. Free from everything. Your freedom from everything is called the non-perception of everything. That's why here the Acharya says, the student says, Nanu Vyavicharo Darshataha Maya. Vyavicharaha means the negation of knowledge is negated, is shown by me. Vyabhicharo darshita, vyabhicharaha means negation. The knowledge cannot have negation. The experience cannot have negation. The knowledge that there is no object has no negation. The sight that there is no object, it has no negation. The object has negation. The object can have a nanu vyabhicharo darshitaha maya. But I have shown you vyabhicharaha, the negation of knowledge. Sushupte na pashamiti. In Sushupti, I always remember that I don't see anything. I don't see before I don't see anything more fundamental than I don't see is I see that I don't see. It's not that you don't see is your belief. It is your knowledge. It is your experience. It is your knowledge, please. And therefore, you are upalabdha. And therefore, na pashyamiti. Na vyaha, the teacher says, na, you are wrong. Vyaha tatvat. You are committing a contradiction, please. Seeing that the sushupti, you are saying I don't see. Seeing you don't see. I don't see is never fundamental. I don't see is only data, the surface statement. The most fundamental is I see that I don't see. Vyahatatvat. Katham vyaghatah. How is that there is a contradiction? Pashyatah tava na pashyami iti. Vyahatam vachanam. You are only committing a contradiction in terms that you are only saying that I don't see anything. I don't see anything is itself seeing. You are seeing, it's not your belief, it is your seeing. And there is no difference between the blackout, the non-dual presence of your being, and the non-dual presence of your being before the birth, and the non-dual presence of your being after the death. And therefore, pashyatah tava na pashyami iti vyahatam vachanam. ये क्या हुआ? Is it all right? ठीक है. Therefore, the student says, Bhagavan Sushupte, Mama Chaitanyam Anyadva Kinchid Nadrashtam. I don't see any Chaitanyam. I don't see any thought. I don't see any object. But then seeing that you are saying that you don't see, that I don't see also is your knowledge. It's not your belief. I don't see is your knowledge. It's not your belief. And therefore, Sushupti is a matter of knowledge. Sushupti is a matter of experience. Bhashakar also says, Anubhuyate, it is indeed experienced. The object of experience can have negation, but experience have no negation. Na pratishedasi, yasmat drishtameva pratishedasi na drishtim. You can only say there is no object of perception, there is no object of sight, but you can always say there is object of sight, there is no object of sight, you can say, but you can't say there is no sight. You can't say there is no object or sense, there is no sight. The sight cannot be negated. I know cannot be negated. Even I don't know is witnessed by I know. I know that I don't know. And therefore, the deep sleep state is a matter of knowledge. The waking state is a matter of knowledge. The dream state is a matter of knowledge. And the deep sleep state also is a matter of knowledge. That means the knowledge is never negatable. When the perception is there, it's not negated. When the perception is not there, it's not negated. When perception of things is there, it is only your presence. Like when the waves are there, water alone is. When the waves are not there, also water alone is. Similarly, here also, when you perceive the things, you alone are there. Consciousness alone is there. And when you don't perceive the things, in Sushupti also, don't perceive the things, the knowledge, your consciousness alone is there. You as consciousness, as awareness alone is there. And therefore, the presence of things doesn't mean the presence of things. The presence of things means your presence. The absence of things also means your presence. And in meditation also, when the thoughts are there, it is your presence. When the thoughts are not there, it is your presence. It is your peaceful presence. And therefore, yathatvam vidyamanaya, and therefore, In order to perceive the things, you require consciousness, but consciousness doesn't require anything. It is independent of it because it is the nature of the pramata. It is the nature of pramata, and pramata does not use the pramanas, the senses, to objectify the objects. You don't use the senses to objectify yourself, to know yourself. You use the eyes to see the colors. You use the ears to hear the sounds. In this manner, five senses are used to know the five sense objects. But you don't use any sense organ to objectify, to know the pramata, because pramata is swata siddham. Pramata is swata siddham. Even in Vedanta, Vedanta also says pramata means is paramata. It is swata siddham. It is self-evident. The subject is self-evident, and therefore the subject doesn't depend upon the subjectness is already felt by everyone, and therefore it is self-existent and self-evident, and therefore it doesn't have to be proved. Your existence doesn't require to be proved. Everything is proved by you, and therefore it is swataha pramanam. It is by itself, it is a pramanam. It is a prover of everything. It is a prover of it. I see things is proved by me, by my knowledge, and that knowledge is my nature, because it is unnegatable. I can negate the I can I can say that there are no labels, there are no objects in sushupti, but you can't say there is no knowledge. There is no darkness as a thing also. I don't perceive. I close my eyes and ears, everything, and then there is no thought, there is no memory, there is no label, there is no body, there is no senses, there is no mind, there is no intellect, there are no faculties, and therefore it is a state of non-dual presence of myself. It is, and therefore knowledge is there. There is no darkness, and therefore, and now here it says, the student says, anityatva eva pramasya. If you say prama means, knowledge of the object. If the awareness is non-eternal, if it is not the nature of, if it is not the nature of pramata, na nityatve iti chet, then alone it can be called pramana. Na nityatve, if knowledge is non-eternal, then alone it can be called pramana. If it is eternal, then it cannot be called prama, knowledge, for which the acharya says no. Avagatehe, the awareness, avagatehe, nityatva anityatvayoho vishesha anupattehe. Nityatva, the eternity and the non-eternity, these words don't apply to awareness. Why? Because when it pertains to when awareness pertains to the objects, it is eternal. Object may be non-eternal. When it doesn't pertain to the objects, also it is eternal. The object is non-eternal, but the awareness is not non-eternal. But when it pertains to the object, it is called prama. When it doesn't pertain to the objects, also it is there, but it is eternal. Even when it pertains to the object, it doesn't become non-eternal. Even when it pertains to the objects, it continues to be eternal. It's avagatehi. Na avagatehe pramatve anitya avagatihi prama. When it pertains to the objects, it is called prama. It doesn't become non-eternal. Awareness doesn't become non-eternal just because it pertains to the objects. It objectifies, it illumines the objects. It doesn't become non-eternal. Na nitya, na nitya iti visheshaha avagamyate. Nitya and anitya, this division is not there in awareness. There is a non-eternal awareness, an eternal awareness. In this manner, there is no division in awareness. Awareness is always eternal. Even when it pertains to the object, it may be called through pramana, it may be called a prama, but it is awareness that looks like prama, but awareness is always eternal. That means you are eternal because awareness is your nature. Just as to be hot is the nature of the fire, or to be luminous is the nature of the sun, in the same manner, well, it is your nature to be awareness, to be Chaitanyam. And that Chaitanyam is itself called jnanam. Call it anubhava, call it awareness, call it chaitanyam, call it knowledge. It doesn't matter at all. Or call it sight. It doesn't matter at all. It's all synonymous. Nityayam pramatuhu apeksha bhava. Now the student says, if it is eternal, nityayam, in the case of the awareness, pramata does not depend upon anything. Anityayam tu यत्नांतरतत्वात् अवगतिः अपेक्षते इति विशेषः स्यादिति चेत् there is a difference between, see, when the awareness is eternal, pramata, because it is the nature of the pramata does not depend upon any pramana. Yes, that is true. Pramata does not depend upon any pramana. It is self-existent. Anityayam to, when it has to pertain to things, when the awareness has to pertain to things, anityayam to yatnantara tattvat, then there is an effort to be made. Avagati apekshate, awareness is required. Iti visheshah sya, there is a difference between the non-eternal and the eternal. When it pertains to the objects, then you have to make an effort. You have to use your will. The individual has to use the will. Yatnantaritatvat. It is always made an effort. It is always, you always make an effort to do that, and therefore, because of the effort, awareness pertains to the objects. If awareness doesn't have to pertain to the objects, awareness is the nature of the pramata, and pramata does not depend upon any pramana, does not depend upon any pramana. In this manner, there is non-eternity and eternity. Difference is there in awareness also. By itself, it is non-eternal, but when it pertains to the objects, it pertaining to the objects means there is an effort made. The will is used to make an effort. You think of it, you see it, you do it, you do the seeing, and therefore there is an effort. Yatnantaritatvat, there is an effort made, and therefore there is a difference between the eternal awareness and the non-eternal Brahma. Iti chet siddha tarhi, the Acharya says siddha tarhi, then it is established. Atmanaha swatah pramatuhu swatah siddhihi. But one thing is clear, that pramata is swatah siddhihi. Pramana, it doesn't depend upon, you don't have to prove your existence. You don't have to use any senses to know yourself. Yourself is self-existent. Your existence is self-existent. Pramatuhu swatah siddhihi. Pramana nirapekshitaya eva. It doesn't depend upon any pramana. Pramana nirapekshitaya eva. As independent of any pramana, pramata is independent, it is self-existent, because it does not depend upon any pramana. Anything that does not depend upon any pramana, it is, and if it is there, self-existent. And Atma is there, so consciousness is there as self-existent. But in Sushupti, I have told that there is no consciousness. Who says there is no consciousness? Even before the birth, there is consciousness. Because before the birth, also, that blackout that you think is a known blackout. It falls within your knowledge. The blackout of Sushupti falls within your knowledge. The blackout after death also that you imagine falls within your knowledge. And therefore, it is a knowledge, it is consciousness. And therefore, and the student says, abhavepi apeksha abhava nityatvat iti chet. See, even consciousness, if it becomes absent, then you don't have to prove its absence. Just as its presence is the nature of the pramata, and the pramata's presence. But but here he says the abhava, the absence of the object, also the absence of pramata, the awareness also doesn't require to be proved. If the presence doesn't have to be proved, its absence also doesn't have to be proved. Its absence also, abhavepi apeksha bhava nityatvat iti chet, and its absence also is eternal. Its absence also is eternal. Consciousness absence also is eternal. If you say its presence is eternal, I say its absence is also eternal. It doesn't have to be proved. If you say that the pramata doesn't have to be proved, and consciousness is the nature of pramata, if it doesn't have to be proved, then the absence of the absence of the consciousness also doesn't have to be proved, and it is being eternal, and it is eternal. Iti chet na. The Acharya says, no, you are wrong. Because avagatereva atman sadbhavaditi parihritam etat. We have already said that knowledge is something that is the very nature of, it is there in the Atma, sadbhavat. It is present in the Atma as its nature. Therefore, knowledge is never absent. Awareness is never absent. Call it knowledge, call it awareness. Awareness is never absent. And therefore, avagatereva atmani avagatihi. Avagatihi means awareness. Avagatereva atmani sadbhavat. Sadbhava means presence. The consciousness is present in the Atma. If consciousness were not present in the Atma, then we can say it's pramata is not self-existent. But pramata being self-existent, awareness also is self-existent. Iti parihritam etat. This has already been negated. This argument has already been answered long ago. Parihritam etat. This has been negated because there is no absence of, there cannot be any absence. There cannot be fire without heat. There cannot be any light without luminosity. And therefore, the sun cannot be without luminosity. The light cannot be without luminosity. The fire cannot be without heat. And between the pramata and awareness, the relationship is one of heat and fire. Pramata is like the fire, and its nature is avagatihi. Avagatihi means is its nature. It cannot be, there cannot be fire without being hot. And there cannot be light without luminosity. Pramatuschet pramana apeksha siddhi. If pramatuschet pramana apeksha siddhi. If pramata were to depend upon pramata means the subject. If the subject were to depend upon the pramana, the sense organs, then kasya pramitsa syat. Here the teacher is asking a question. Kasya pramitsa syat. Then who has got the desire to know? Who has got the desire to know? Who has the desire to know? Kasya pramitsa syat. Yasya pramitsa sayeva pramada abhipagamyate. Yasya pramitsa, the one who has the desire, he alone is called pramata, abhipagamyate, he is called pramata. Tadiyacha pramitsa prameya vishaya eva. And he always has the desire to see the other object other than himself, because he never opens the eyes to see his existence. Even a blind man that has the eyes, he wants to have the eyes so that he can see the objects. Even a blind man knows that his existence is very much felt by him, and therefore, Yasya pramitsa sayeva pramada abhipagamate. The one who has the desire to see the objects, he alone is called pramata, whereas his existence is self-existent. And if his existence is self-existent, then awareness also is self-existent. Pramata abhipagamyate. Tadiyacha pramitsa prameya vishaya eva, na pramatra vishaya. And the pramata always wants to know the objects as objects of knowledge. He never wants to use the senses to know himself. He never uses the senses. He always use the senses. He may use the Vedanta to understand himself. To understand himself. It is not objectifying himself. Even Shabda Pramana is not required in order to prove the existence of yourself. Even Vedanta Pramana doesn't prove your existence. It only points out your existence is self-evident. कौन है? Na pramatru vishaya. Pramata always knows the prameya vishaya. Awareness always objectifies the objects. Pramata always objectifies the objects. Pramata doesn't objectify himself. Prameya vishaya eva. Na pramatru vishaya. Pramatru vishayatve anavastha prasangat. If pramata has to objectify his own self, then the previous pramata. In order to objectify the pramata, then there has to be another pramata. And that pramata also can be objectified. And to objectify that pramata, you require another pramata. In this manner, regressus ad infinitum will take place. This is a flaw. This is a flaw in thinking. And therefore, prima vision, na pramatra vishaya. Pramatra vishayatve anavastha प्रसंगात प्रमातुः तदिच्छायाश्च तस्यापि अन्यः प्रमाता तस्यापि अन्यः इति एवमेव तद् इच्छायाः प्रमातृविषयत्वे प्रमातुर्नाम प्रमातः प्रमातुः इच्छा. The desire is there. Pramata has a desire, a smriti. He has to have a desire for an object. That object is other than himself. Pramata, he the smriti, memory, he can remember the object. That object is other than himself. Smriti. Similarly, prayatna, when he makes the effort, that effort, he makes the effort to know the object, and that object is other than himself. But he doesn't have to make any effort to feel his own existence. His existence is self-evident, self-existent. Prayatna. Pramana janma vivahitam siddhyati. Pramana, pramana, and the distance between his pramata and that object alone establishes that they all can be objectified. The object of desire can be objectified. The object of memory can be objectified. The memory of effort can be objectified. The memory of the sense objects can be objectified. The sense object also can be objectified because there is a distance between the pramata and the object, and it's unlike the pramata subject. It is unlike the subject. There may not be any distance, but the distance is in the avidya, it is felt. And when the avidya is in avidya, the distance is felt, and due to the distance, pramata objectifies the objects of desire, objects of memory, objects of effort, and objects of the senses can be offered. But he can't objectify himself. The subject cannot objectify himself. And because the subject, between the subject and subject, there is no distance. The subject is not unlike the subject. That is a wrong thing to say. The subject is unlike the subject, you can't say. The subject is unlike the object, and therefore he can objectify. The subject is not unlike the subject, and therefore the subject cannot objectify the subject. Therefore, he has no desire to, the consciousness doesn't desire to objectify consciousness. The consciousness, the pramata, the subject doesn't have the desire to objectify another, it's himself, and he doesn't remember the subject. And he doesn't also make an effort to entertain his existence, nor does he use the senses to objectify himself. And therefore, when the pramata doesn't objectify the pramata, when the subject doesn't objectify the subject, consciousness also doesn't objectify the consciousness. Why? Because consciousness is the very nature of the pramata, is the very nature of the subject. And therefore, लोके हि प्रमेयं नाम प्रमातुः इच्छा स्मृति प्रयत्न प्रमाण जन्म विवेकम सिद्ध्यति न अन्यथा, not otherwise. Unless there is dissimilarity, I cannot objectify. What I objectify has to be a distance. There has to be a distance between me and it. Should be unlike me. It should be unlike me. What is unlike me, I can objectify. What is like, I alone am like myself. The subject alone is like the subject. When I see the person also, I objectify his body, all right, I objectify his thoughts, all right, but I can't objectify the subject. I can't objectify myself, the subject. I can't objectify yourself, the subject. But you are also the subject. But that subject is indeed cannot be objectified. Neither you can objectify yourself, nor I can objectify yourself. Neither you can objectify me, the subject, nor I can objectify me, myself, the subject. The subject is not subject to objectification. My teacher used to say, the subject is not subject to objectification. Prameya Vishaya Drishta. Avagatihi Prameya Vishaya Drishta. Awareness always tries to objectify the objects. Why? Because that is the nature of the Pramata. And Pramata always objectifies the objects which are unlike him. He is a conscious being, and the objects are inert things. You can only objectify the inert things. You can only know the inert things. Nacha pramatahu pramata swasya swayameva kenachit vyavahitah. The pramata, the subject is not unlike the subject. The subject is not distanced from the same subject. The subject is not distanced from the subject. I cannot really objectify myself, the subject. I cannot objectify you also, the subject. When you transcend your form, when you are not the form, when I am not the form, then we are one and the same. We are absolute. Absolute means there is no parallel to us. You are absolute, I am also absolute. And what divides between what the wall that stands between you and me is only the thought that I am the form. You also feel the thought that I am the form. I also feel the thought that I am the form. It is this thought that I am the form is what is called aham vrittihi. The thought that I am the form is called aham pratyaya. This is a pratyaya, please. It is a thought. It is a notion. I am the form is a notion. It's not a fact. It's not. It is a notion. प्रमेय विषया दृष्टा न च प्रमातुः प्रमाता स्वस्य स्वयमेव केनचित् व्यवहृतः कल्पयितुं शक्यः इच्छादीना अन्यतमेनापि. In fact, nobody can, even the desire cannot prove that the pramata is different from pramata. The subject can be objectified by the subject. Ichha cannot prove. Ichha, I can only know the object of desire. I can only know the object of memory. I can only know the object of effort. I can only know the object of will. I can only know the object of the senses. I cannot objectify. I cannot make my own existence the object. इच्छादीनाम् अन्यतमेनापि स्मृतिश्च स्मर्तव्यविषया. Smriti, memory also pertains to to be remembered object. Smriti does not pertain to, you can't remember yourself. The subject cannot be remembered. What you remember is only your labels. Even this is not memory. I was there in the dream is not a memory. It is a kalpita memory. It is a kalpita pratyabhijna. Even when you think of the blackout, it is not a memory place. It is a kalpita pratyabhijna. It is something, it is a kalpita. We call it memory, but it's not memory place. Memory is something that functions. Memory is a faculty that works in the same state. The waking memory pertains to the waking objects. In the dream memory pertains to the dream objects. And the deep sleep state, it is a consciousness that pertains to no perception, that alone is, and that is experienced by consciousness now, that is remembered. That is not, it's not remembered, it is not memory, it's not memory, it is a pratyabhijna. Pratyabhijna means recollection. Recollection also means you think that it is memory, but it is not a memory place. Strictly speaking, it's not memory. Similarly, ichha can pertain to ichha vishayam. The desire can pertain to the object of desire. The desire cannot objectify the subject. The desire cannot, na ichhavad vishayatvam. It doesn't pertain to, the desire does not pertain to ichhavad vishayatvam, the desirer. The desirer is not the object. The desirer is the subject. Smriti इच्छावद् विषयत्वेपि हि उभयोः अनवस्था पूर्वदेव अपरिहार्या स्यात्. That means if memory pertains to me and icha, desire pertains to me, then it will lead to regress ad infinitum as before. If memory, if the subject thinks of himself as the subject, that it leads to, in order to know the pramata as pramata, you require one more pramata, and that pramata to be also can be known, and that pramata to be known, you require another pramata. In this manner, you will have regress ad infinitum. Regress ad infinitum means it is a flaw in thinking. You always precipitate a flaw in thinking by thinking wrongly, because what is self-existent, you are mistaking it as to be proved. Your existence doesn't have to be proved. Your existence is self-evident, and therefore, purvada apariharya syat. And therefore, if it is a flaw in thinking, and that flaw can be corrected only by correcting your thinking, and Vedanta is a pramanam that is meant to correct your thinking. It's not meant to correct any the truth. It is correcting your thinking about the truth. It is correcting your thinking about the truth, and therefore Vedanta Pramana, it is correcting your thinking. When I am the form, when I am thinker, it only says you are not related to anything. You are all by yourself. Your existence is yourself. You are unlike the objects, but you are inclusive of all the objects. Like the water is unlike the wave. The wave is, I call it a wave. It is their vacharamna vikaro namadeyam. It is a clay. I call it a pot. I call it a wave, but it is water. Similarly, I call myself this form, but I am being consciousness. This is the difference between what I am and what I think I am, and that is corrected by Vedanta. Vedanta, that is why it is called Atad Vyavartakam Pramanam. It is only corrective of what I am not. It says you are not the form, you are not related, you are unlike everything, but you are comprehensive of everything. You are unlike everything. Your consciousness, you are unlike everything. Everything depends upon the senses, but your existence does not depend upon senses. And your existence is unlike everything, and it is comprehensive of everything. And as comprehensive of everything, you are Ishvara. As yourself alone, you are Brahman. You are non-dual presence. And therefore, the blackout, which scares everybody, that blackout has to be understood as your knowledge, as your presence, because the blackout cannot be known to you unless you have knowledge of blackout. And therefore, blackout is not what is the truth. Your knowledge is the truth. Knowledge is yourself. Knowledge is your nature. Anubhava is your nature. Consciousness is your nature. And the more of it we'll see in the next class. Thank you. Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.